case for reparations, uncovering past injustices. The reparations are a complex and contentious issue that has been discussed and debated for decades. It revolves around the idea of compensating individuals or communities who have historically suffered from systemic injustices such as slavery, segregation, and discrimination. They are intended to address the enduring economic, social, and psychological impacts of past wrongs and promote greater societal equality and justice. The form and implementation of reparations can vary depending on the historical context and the affected communities. Welcome to our channel. Subscribe and let's dive in. So today, we're talking about one of the most controversial topics called reparations, which has been moving through American politics for over 150 years. And we're going to explore some incidents that happened in the past and how they are extended to the present world. First, we'll look at examples of common reparation methods used worldwide. Next, we'll trace the history of the arguments for and against reparations to Black Americans. And finally, we'll discuss where the arguments around reparations stand in the US today. Articles like Coaches often focus solely on the history and arguments for reparations for Black Americans, who are the descendants of slaves, because of historic harm inflicted on that community by the US government. But there's actually a much larger conversation to be had. Before we dive into the then and now of reparations debates, we should first look at the ways of reparation. Financial compensation is one of the most straightforward methods of providing monetary reparations to the affected individuals or their descendants. This could be in the form of direct payments, lump sum settlements, or long-term financial support. Among them, land restitution is in cases where land was taken from certain communities during historical injustices. Returning the land or providing alternative land assets can be a form of reparation. Reparations may include measures to improve access to quality education and training for affected communities, such as scholarships, grants, or funding for educational programs as educational opportunities. Providing improved healthcare services, medical facilities, and access to mental health resources can be a part of reparations, especially for communities that have experienced health disparities due to historical injustices. Reparations can involve targeted investments in infrastructure, economic development, and social programs within affected communities to foster growth and empowerment. Implementing affirmative action measures in education, employment, and other areas can help address systemic disparities and provide opportunities to historically marginalized groups. In addition, public apologies from government or institutional leaders, policy reforms, cultural and heritage preservation, implementing initiatives that focus on equity and representation in various sectors such as politics, media, and business, and creating special economic zones or preferential tax policies can be indicated as examples for common reparation methods. What are your thoughts on the ongoing debate surrounding reparations for the United States' involvement in slavery? The debate on reparations for Black Americans has been ongoing since the Civil War. The phrase 40 acres and a mule is commonly associated with this argument. Where does the frequently cited phrase and its underlying concept originate, although it's come to stand for the promises made and broken to the 4 million slaves immediately following the abolition of slavery at the end of the Civil War? This history is also a little more complicated than that. This historical nugget is derived from General William T. Sherman's Special Field Order No. 15. Even though the mule was not explicitly mentioned in the order, historian Henry Louis Gates, Jr. explains in an article that the order was insignificant for several significant reasons after the war. On January 16, 1865, an order was issued following a meeting between Union General Sherman and Secretary of War Edwin M. Stanton with 20 Black community leaders in Savannah, Georgia, 4 days prior. The leader suggested that what newly minted Black citizens wanted most was land. One of the leaders, Reverend Garrison Fraser, is quoted as saying, "The way we can best take care of ourselves is to have land and turn it and it by our own labor, and we can soon maintain ourselves and have something to spare. We want to be placed on land until we are able to buy it and make it our own." All of the community leaders were asked if black people should form self-run communities to avoid prejudice in the South. All but one agreed. Stanton and Sherman assigned land to newly emancipated black people for their own reasons, in addition to considering the suggestions they received. First, they were looking for ways to weaken the morale and financial stronghold of Southern Confederate landowners. Second, they sought a solution for how to provide for the millions of newly emancipated black people who'd either followed the Union into battle or been set free by the Emancipation Proclamation. After Lincoln, President Andrew Johnson sympathized with the South and canceled the order that had been issued that same year. This meant that the land was returned to the plantation owners who had originally owned it. However, the phrase 40 acres and a mule continued to be a symbol of the hope for justice for descendants of the enslaved, as well as a reminder of broken promises during the Reconstruction period. It should be noted that Sherman's Special Field Order No. 15 was not the final instance of reparations being paid to members of the black community. It's worth noting that certain members of the black community have received reparations and apologies from state and federal governments for specific cases of mistreatment. One example is the Tuskegee syphilis study, which took place from 1932 to 1972. During this time, researchers and doctors misled impoverished black men who had volunteered for the study, telling them they were receiving treatment for syphilis, when in reality, they were only given vitamins and placebos, allowing the disease to spread unchecked. As a result, the men became increasingly ill and even passed the disease on to their partners and children. The Associated Press's Jean Heller exposed the study in 1972, leading to public outrage and the eventual termination of the study. As compensation, the survivors received a $10 million out-of-court settlement, and the U.S. government promised healthcare and burial services for those affected. Later on, the government extended healthcare and other services to the spouses and descendants of the men. President Clinton issued an apology in 1997 for the government's cruel experiment, and the city of Chicago paid reparations to victims of former police commander John Burge. For almost 20 years, from the 1970s to the 1990s, Burge led a crew of officers who tortured mostly black men into giving confessions for crimes they did not commit. Over 125 men were tortured by Burge and his affiliates, and in 2015, the city approved reparations for the survivors of these crimes. As part of the $5.5 million settlement, money was paid to survivors and their families. Tuition to city colleges was waived. A mandatory curriculum about Burge's crimes was implemented in Chicago public schools, and a public memorial is still yet to be constructed at the time of creating this video. Regarding arguments for reparations for descendants of the enslaved, some people argue that no one currently alive is personally or financially responsible for the crimes committed before emancipation. Supporters of reparations, like Coates, contend that the economic and social aftermath of slavery are responsible for the ongoing disparities in wealth, housing, and health within black communities in the U.S. Professor Katrina Forrester discusses the history of the black community's pursuit of reparations for slavery in her article titled Reparations, History, and the Origins of Global Justice. Despite ongoing advocacy for reparations, there remains significant disagreement within these groups. This struggle has persisted throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. Forrester has written, American proponents of reparations for slavery disagree over what they would look like, pecuniary or non-pecuniary. One-off cash transfers to individuals, as in South Africa, or compensation in the form of transfers or pensions, like German reparations to Jewish victims of Nazism. Public investment, group-specific banks, trust or funds, the return of land, job guarantees for black workers. There are disagreements over what reparations are for and how they should be calculated, whether they should compensate unpaid slave labor, unjust enrichment of slaveholders, wrongs suffered in the Jim Crow South, or wrongs suffered because of institutional racism in home buying, segregated education, and so on in the North. What is our current status on the matter? In 2019, the House of Representatives contemplated establishing a commission to investigate reparations for slavery. They also conducted a hearing during which experts, such as journalists like Coates, were called upon to testify. Although reparations for slavery have not been made yet, there is ongoing activism and interest in pushing the conversation forward. Regardless of one's stance on this specific instance of reparations, it is important to acknowledge historical and legal precedents for compensating certain communities over time. It's possible that in the future, the US may address its history with slavery by making financial reparations or by promoting a greater educational understanding of its legacy. However, until a resolution is reached, the debate over this issue may be continued. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more reels and share your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon in the next video.